Welcome to Andy Staples On3. Happy talking season. That's right. It all starts today out in Las Vegas, Big 12 Media Days. Kicking it off, Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark takes the stage at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. local. I'm interested to hear Brett Yormark because of all the commissioners, he feels like the one who will say the most interesting things because he does not come from the world of college sports. He comes from the world of entertainment. He comes from pro sports. And yes, that gets you Nelly performing at a halftime of a conference championship game, but it also gets you a fresh take on some things. And so I'm curious to hear what Brett Yormark has to say about all the changes going on in college sports because he looks at it from a different perspective. I would assume there's going to be a little victory lap because the Big 12 is here and the Pac-12, well, they're having a cocktail party for the two teams that they have left in Las Vegas, kind of piggybacking on Big 12 Media Days. But it'd be interesting to hear what Brett Yormark has to say. I imagine he'll get asked about the idea of selling the conference's naming rights. You heard me when that came out about a month ago. I was like, yeah, go for it. Big 12 doesn't make any sense. No real brand value of that. You don't have 12 teams anymore. Why not? Sell that sucker. Make some money. But we'll see what he says. Very curious to hear what Brett Yormark has to say. Mike Gundy will be there today. Kyle Whittingham, Utah's coach. Third different conference for Kyle Whittingham. He has coached Utah in the Mountain West. He's coached Utah in the Pac-12, and he has coached Utah now in the Big 12. He's won the other two. Can he win the Big 12 as well? I think there's a lot of people who think he's the favorite. Also, Matt Campbell. One of the great turnaround stories last year, and you remember, oh yeah, Matt Campbell's a pretty good coach. Remember at the beginning of last season, they lost to Ohio U. Things were looking very bleak for Matt Campbell. Well, guess what? He's back. I wouldn't count out Iowa State. That's what makes the Big 12 so interesting. I don't know who's going to win this thing. I could probably name you 10 teams that could win it. And one of those teams is probably going to be the 3 or the 4 seed in the playoff. It's amazing. So we'll hear from those guys today. We're 6 days away from the start of SEC Media Days. We're a week away from early access to EA Sports College Football 25. So if you ordered the deluxe edition, if you ordered the bundle with Madden, you get to play in a week. I'll be at SEC Media Days. I've got to find, I don't think I can smuggle my kid's PlayStation out of the house. So I might have to find a friend who lives in the Dallas Metroplex who might be willing to let me come play. I think I know a couple people there. So hopefully I will be able to sneak away from SEC Media Days, get some gaming in, and come back with a full report. Hopefully. David G says, will Oregon State and Washington State keep the Pac-12 branding on the uniforms and on the field? Yes, I believe they will. I think it's part of what they have to do to keep the money is they're going to stay the Pac-12 for 2 years, and then they've got to figure it out because there's a transitional period after stuff changes, but they need to make sure that their teams will still be eligible for the NCAA basketball tournament. Within 2 years, they have to get their membership back up to, I believe it's 8 or more. And so they'll figure it. I've been saying this since everything went down last year. My guess is they'll wind up merging with the Mountain West. I don't know if the Pac-12 name stays. I would keep the name. It has pretty good brand equity. You could just change the number to whatever number of teams you have. That's happened before. Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12. So why not? Another interesting story. We're going to have Steve Wiltfong on later today. We're also going to have Arizona head coach Brent Brennan. So he's not talking to Big 12 Media Days until tomorrow, but he's on this show today. So we'll talk to Brent Brennan about taking over the Wildcats. Steve Wiltfong, On3's Vice President of Recruiting and Transfer Portal. We'll talk about a bunch of 5 stars and 4 stars and new rankings. We've updated the rankings at On3 for the class of 2025. There were some people very happy about that, some people very mad about that. We'll talk to Steve about that. We'll also talk to him about a little surge at Michigan. We'll talk to him about the Oregon success we talked to Justin Hopkins about yesterday. But one thing I want to talk about, we don't normally talk about when 3 stars commit to Georgia, but I will say, given Kirby Smart's history with under-the-radar recruits, I feel like this is worth noting. Plus, it's just a crazy story. So yesterday, Georgia got a commitment from a 3-star offensive tackle named Ja Jackson. Now, this is not for the class of 2025. This is for the class of 2024. This guy will be starting camp with the Bulldogs next month. So what is interesting about Ja Jackson? He has not played football since middle school. He is a 6'11" big man who's been playing for Overtime Elite in Atlanta. Overtime Elite is a basketball development program where guys who are future NBA players go play there and either go to college from there or they can go straight into the draft from there. For example, he played alongside Alex Sarr, French guy he was the number 2 pick in the draft this year for the Wizards. He also played alongside Rob Dillingham, who played at Kentucky this past year and was the number 8 pick in the draft. So that is a very interesting. You're watching a little video of Ja Jackson handling the rock, moving around at 6'11", 315. So apparently he's been in the gym lifting for football, considering a switch to football. He was going to still consider pro basketball, but the people at Overtime Elite said, hey, look, if you don't like your prospects for pro basketball, if you'd rather try something that could potentially be really valuable, you could switch to football. And so he started working out, training for football, started learning offensive line technique. Basically, every school that got a look at him offered him. So his top 5 was Arkansas, Florida, Florida State, Mississippi, and Georgia. He had lots of options. And basically anybody who would have seen him, if he'd gone to a camp there, they would have offered him. And so he had all kinds of choices, decides to go to Georgia. And obviously the offensive line of Georgia is pretty tough to crack, especially if you haven't played it since middle school. But this is one of those situations where it may or may not work. But if it does work, holy crap. Because if you saw that video of him playing basketball, this guy's a good athlete. Remember, the people he's playing against at Overtime Elite are excellent basketball players, major college level players, NBA potential players. And he's capable of playing with those guys. He's that good of an athlete. Now, the height, we're not used to this. Jacksonville State has an offensive lineman who's 6'11" right now. Arkansas had Dan Skipper, who played there at 6'10", who plays for the Detroit Lions now. But there are not a lot of offensive linemen, even at the biggest position on the football field, who are that tall. Now, we've seen 6'8", 6'9". Jonathan Ogden was a 6'8", 6'9" offensive lineman who's in the NFL Hall of Fame. So it's doable at that height, but it's hard. You better be a great athlete. You better be able to bend. But I am fascinated by this because you guys know from listening to this show that every NCAA tournament, half the fun for me is picking out the guys who I think should be playing football. So this is one of those guys. Cannot wait to see what happens with Ja Jackson. It may not work out. He may end up going back to basketball, playing pro somewhere, but this is a fascinating story to watch. And again, we don't normally cover 3-star offensive linemen committing to Georgia, but I believe Kirby Smart has earned the benefit of the doubt with his evaluation skills. So we'll see what happens with Ja Jackson. But next up, we go back across the country to Tucson to talk to Brent Brennan, the Arizona football coach who inherited an incredible situation that he had to work to keep incredible, because in this day and age, when a coach leaves, you don't just get to inherit their roster. Jed Fish goes to Washington, left behind a great roster at Arizona, but the question when Jedd Fisch left was how many of these guys are also going to go to Washington? Well, it turns out not very many. Most of that core stayed together at Arizona, giving Brent Brennan a chance to come into the Big 12 and really make some noise. But first, we're going to talk Game Time. We love our sponsor, Game Time, the place to get last-minute tickets, the place to get your college football tickets for this year. If you're planning your college football travel, let's say you're an Arizona fan and you're looking at those games, those first two Big 12 games, at Kansas State, at Utah. So if you want to go to the Little Apple, new spot for you guys. By the way, Manhattan, Kansas is a fabulous town. Fabulous. Hit Varsity Donuts. Hit up the Chef for breakfast. Hit up Radina's Bakehouse for coffee. You will love it. And that stadium gets going, especially when they're really good. So you could do that. You can go to Utah. You're used to Utah, but look, Salt Lake's a great town. Rice-Eccles Stadium, there are no bad seats. All of those seats on Game Time. You can look at where you'd be sitting. You turn your phone. It's like turning your head inside the stadium. You see exactly what your view would be. Couple of taps. That ticket is yours. And if you use the code STAPLES, you get $20 off your first purchase. So download that Game Time app, whether it's college football games that you plan to go to, concerts, comedy shows, you name it. They have tickets for all of it. Use that code STAPLES for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Go to Game Time right now and get those tickets. The last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed at Game Time. All right, now it is time to talk to the guy who probably did the best recruiting job of his life, keeping the players on his roster. Here's Brent Brennan. We are joined from Tucson by the new head coach of the Arizona Wildcats, Brent Brennan. Coach, we were talking about in your office, it's sort of to the left of your left shoulder. You've got this wall of photos that is, all the different points in your career. When you look at that stuff, and then you look at where you are, does it hit you how far you've come? You were the young guy, 2000 GA at Arizona working for Dick Tomey, and now you're running the whole thing.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe, but it's fun having those pictures up there. It's something fun for the players to talk about when they come in or ask questions about. I got my family up there too, so there's lots of questions they have. Well, who's that? Who's that? So it's just that kind of fun stuff. And we're swapping them out all the time. We're putting, I'm trying to add current pictures of players here, fun stuff, fun things that we're doing as a team here to, keep it fresh.
Well, and how well have you gotten to know these guys? Because you came in January. It was a wild scenario where Jedd Fisch, leaves because Kalen DeBoer goes to Alabama. And so this was all after the national championship game last year, after the early signing day. How much time have you really had to get to know this group at this point?
Well, I'd say we've done a ton of that just because, that was so important. People kept asking me like, hey, how come you're not offering this 26 quarterback or this class of 25 kid? And I said, well, because we're actively recruiting the 2024 team in Arizona. We were just getting to know each other, and it was fast and furious. And obviously there's a lot of turmoil, and they'd had a great season here, and there's a bunch of really good players. And, I think I was going through that. I was also empathetic with the players because I had just left the team at San Jose, and I know how that felt for me and for our team. And so, we spent a ton of time getting to know each other, and we're continuing to do so. We're having a lot of fun in the process.
So I saw Noah Fifita, your quarterback, when he won the Steve Spurrier Award, and heard him talk about the decision to stay and the decision to try to rally everybody else into staying. How much did you have to work, on these guys to say, hey, look, this is what my program is going to be like. We would love to have you here, but how does that conversation go? Because I imagine you mentioned being empathetic. You just left a job too. So how do you handle those conversations?
Well, yeah, I think, the first team meeting I had when I got introduced to the team, I just told them that let's start out with respecting each other, and over time I'll earn your trust. And that was a good kind of an easy starting point for us. I didn't come in there talking crazy or like I had all the answers, because like I mentioned before, I was feeling, kind of the hard part of leaving San Jose and leaving the players that I had grown close with there. So it was just a matter of spending time with them, and that second day on the job, Noah brought a bunch of players to my office and we just sat and talked for 2 hours. And I just let them ask questions. I said, whatever you want to know, go ahead. And when we were done, they said, I was like, how was that? They're like, oh, that was cool. Thanks, coach. I said, all right. Hey, thank you guys. And then the next day, and then I said, do you guys want to do this again tomorrow? And they said, yeah. And then they came in the next day and it was the same thing. And, they all had questions, and some of them were funny and some of them were, like simple, like what color cleats are we going to wear or whatever. But it was just, there was a real, just like trying to accelerate the getting to know each other process. And Noah Fifita is a special kid, man. Like anyone that's ever been around him, like he is everything that's right about college football, everything.
So he has a show with Tetairoa McMillan, your amazing receiver, and they're friends from way back. But I was laughing because they were talking about the decision to stay, and T-Mac goes, "I just didn't want to move all my shoes," and then Noah says, "Hey, for an hour there, I was going to Washington, like I had decided to leave," and then he said it just sort of to pull on him the idea of maybe if we stay together, we all stay together. And for the most part, they did all stay together. And how did that process go as you were finding out, okay, they do want to stay?
Yeah, that was just an incredible moment when, because it was Noah and T-Mac grabbed me in my office and said, hey, we want to talk to you. And so they broke it down for me, and it was really special. And I think the team is incredibly close, and Coach Fish and that staff did a great job of recruiting quality young men and quality players. And, that connection they felt. And I think also some of the, the trials and tribulations that they've been through, right? They've been through some years of hard football and not playing good football. Then all of a sudden they had this magic year where everything takes off and goes in and goes right. And, they're really, really extremely connected. And I think that part of it was something that they weren't willing to walk away from.
As a new staff, how much does it help when you come in and you're talking about that's within days of you coming in. So to find out that you've got that sort of veteran leadership on your team and it's going to be there for you this season.
No, I think that's incredible. I think, Dwayne Aquina had a lot to do with the players staying here, Brett Arcee, some of the young coaches on staff. That carryover really, really helped. I think also the way the city of Tucson responded at that basketball game to the announcement of, all of those defensive backs choosing to stay, all those veteran leaders on defense choosing to stay. And then also Noah and T-Mac also that day. That part's really special about this place. It's just how the city of Tucson loves this, loves this university, loves our players. That's really, really special here. And I think they felt that. And I think they knew that was something that they might not be able to guarantee it anywhere else they went.
So you had that experience as a young coach where you spent 1 year as a GA for Dick Tomey at Arizona. What'd you learn about the school and the city of Tucson in that year?
Well, that was just kind of what I just talked about. That's the coolest part is just the city's, it has, pretty big population, but it doesn't feel that way. It has really a small town feel. And so everything in the city revolves around the U of A. And that part of it, I think is special, because I just came from a situation where we are sharing that space with 4 pro franchises and 6 other universities. And it was a much different, dynamic in that community. But with it here, it's all about this. And it's all about Saturdays in the fall, or, basketball games or softball or baseball. I mean, just the city is so into what's happening on this campus. And I think that makes it a really special experience for the players.
Speaking of those players, you mentioned how special Noah is. When you first get T-Mac on the practice field, what's going through your mind?
I'm just blown away by his, so I'm a receiver guy by trade, right? That's what I coached. And so I had, remembered him in high school and then watched, we watched every Arizona game we could. My wife's an alum. My brother played here. I was just blown away by his body control and his route running and his ability to finish on the ball. It's unlike anyone I've ever seen. And, that part of it is exciting because, he's a playmaker, but he's also an intense competitor. And when you combine that stuff, you have a chance to do some incredible things.
And, we talked earlier about that group, but I'm not sure people understand how big that group is of guys who were really key players on last year's team who have been, and you mentioned they've been through some tougher times. How important is it to have, third, fourth year players who have played a ton in this era of college football where, usually the first year coach coming in, you just don't have that. You're not going to get that. You're going to have to bring in guys from the portal who may have played somewhere else, but not people who've played together.
Right. I think it's special. And I think that speaks to the culture the previous staff built here. I think it speaks to the culture of the University of Arizona. And then also who those players are, right? Big Jonah Savanea or, Jacob Manu, those guys, Gunnar Maldonado, Traden Stukes, just those guys being so connected and, really wanting to protect the team and protect the program. And that part of it, to watch that, right? Because I'm just kind of maybe a semi-active bystander, but it was amazing to watch them do that and to watch them support each other and want to be there for each other and want to keep moving forward together instead of being selfish or individuals and going their own way. Their desire to keep this team intact and to continue to play for the University of Arizona was really, really special.
Now you were going into a new league no matter what, because you were moving jobs, but now your team also going into a new league. What does that change for you? Does it change your recruiting footprint at all? Because you were recruiting California, the Arizona, was recruiting Arizona and kind of shifting into Southern California during the Pac-12 days. But does it shift your focus more east, or does it kind of stay where it was?
No, I think first and foremost, we have to do an incredible job recruiting the state of Arizona. There's excellent high school football here. There's real talent. And so we have to do a great job in state. But I do think it gives us a chance to push into Texas a little bit. And, that's something that Arizona had done over the years. And I think now that we're going to be playing more games there, it just makes it a lot easier. And then I think we need to do a great job in Southern California, or just California in general. And there's because the teams in California, they're going to be playing in different places too. And so I think Arizona can be a great destination for California kids because, all the teams that are playing college football in that state are, a lot of them are going to be going far away to play.
And what's it like for you and a staff in the off season as you're getting to know a whole new bunch of opponents? I mean, is that basically everybody gets assigned, some teams and they have the off season breakdown, or how much research goes into who you've got to play way before you actually have to play them?
That's a good question. I think that's a fine line because I think you can make yourself crazy breaking down games from last year, and teams in today's day and age, teams change so much year to year. Right. And so, by the time we get to, conference play, we'll have already played 2 games. And so I think most of the people were playing. So we're going to have 2-3 games on everybody, by the time we're getting ready to go. And that'll be a better indication of the team those, our opponents in the Big 12 are going to be. And so, we've definitely done our preliminary scouting reports and been through all that, but we're going to be much more focused on, what's happening in this season when we get to the season. And really right now, and the players, I'm driving them crazy with it and our staff, but all that matters to me is playing good football against New Mexico week 1. I know that sounds cliche, but you only get to play 13 and they all matter. They all count the same on the final ledger.
And you can't do it any other way. And also, neither you nor your AD, Desiree Reed-Francois, who just got there, were around when they made that schedule and stuck you guys with at K-State and at Utah to start conference play. So you're getting hazed by the league, and that's okay, though. But you're right. Focus on the Lobos, and the other stuff will take care of itself.
Yeah, we'll always be a 1 week at a time, football team. I mean, that's just we're gonna drill down hard on that. But you're right. And really the other one that's in there is another road game at BYU that's in that same month. And so, that is, 3 of those 4 games, I mean, those are 4 really good teams in a row there. But I also think the conference is really tough. And so you're going to have to beat good people if you want to be a good team. And so we got a lot of work to do.
So how excited are you to get back with this team? Because like we were talking about it, you don't really find a lot of teams in this day and age, in the transfer portal era, where there is this core. So I imagine a lot of the player-led workouts probably go pretty smoothly here. And you probably are getting an improved football team coming back to you when practice starts.
Yeah, I would think so, just because the leadership of the team is so strong. There's just really good leaders at each position, and those guys are really driving the group. And so that part is, I can't wait to get back, right? We'll be back in, full swing in a couple of weeks here. But, once you get into it, there's no getting out of it, right? So it's really putting the onus on them to understand that player-led teams are the best teams to be a part of. And this time of the year, this is their time to lead, and this is their time to push. And they have to do the work and dive into that process to have a chance to get the results they want.
So you had some interesting mentors in the business. You worked for Dick. I mentioned you were GA for Dick Tomey, but you also worked for Dick Tomey at San Jose State, and then Mike Riley at Oregon State. How did they help shape who you are as a coach?
I think every coach I've ever worked for I've learned something from them that has helped shape who I am as a football coach. I'm grateful for all of those experiences. Obviously the Coach Tomey family tree has been just such a critical group of men for me, but I'm lucky. There's so many guys that have helped me on this journey, and I feel so fortunate to be able to, be around, or to have been around them. And Coach Riley was just fantastic. We had a lot of fun coaching together up at Oregon State. And, him and Coach Tomey were so different because Mike was such an offensive football guy, right? I mean,
yep.
He was such an offensive guy, and where Coach Tomey was the other way, right? So
yeah,
Coach Tomey used to joke and say, someday during your journey, you might get promoted to defense. Like, he would tell the team that.
Well, and the thing is, we've talked about your quarterback and your star receiver. You mentioned Jacob Manu and Gunnar Maldonado earlier. I mean, you guys have a lot coming back on defense as well. This is not a team that's always going to have to outscore people.
No, we're excited about that defensive group, and I feel great about the coaching leadership on that side of the ball with Coach Aquina and the defensive staff. And so, we're excited. I think like everybody else this time of year, everyone's incredibly optimistic, and we're excited to get to work and start, kind of figuring out who we are as a football team schematically so that we can, kind of keep accelerating towards the football season. But there's some really good players in that defensive front I think we're going to be excited about. And then also, Takario Davis, choosing to take himself out of the portal late there was big for us because he's a really talented player. And so there's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun things that have been happening, bit by bit as we go through it. I think now we're all just kind of getting anxious to start playing football again.
Well, and how stressful was the spring portal window for you? Because what we talked about earlier was the one where, the coaching transition happened, but then you had to deal with another one too. Well, did you have to redo all of the sales pitch you had made, or at that point was it like, okay, you guys are here, good?
Yeah, I would say that the head coaching portal was more stressful than the spring one. I think once again, like I mentioned, I told them, hopefully I'd earn their trust over time, and that's what we've kind of been doing. And as we, as we got on the practice field, and as they got a sense of what our meetings are going to be like, and what our staff's going to be like, and how our staff is going to coach and teach, and how we're going to, work together and care about each other. I think that helped make the spring portal not as big of a deal for us to work through.
Well, that's what T-Mac and Noah had said. Their first impression of you, like that first meeting, so nice and mellow. So have they seen the non-mellow side by now, and they can still handle it? That's good.
Yeah, I think that I'm always trying to just be honest with the players that we coach and the people that work with us here. So I just want to be straight up with them and tell them what we need to do to get better, and tell them what I think they're doing well, and just give us a chance to, believe in each other and build that trust. And so that we can continue to really push them, really push each other, and hopefully build a championship football team here at Arizona.
Now, we mentioned that wall of photos. Right now, of the ones you got up, what's your favorite?
Well, I got to say it's the one of my wife and I, right? That's the slam dunk, right? That's
layup. Easy. Beautiful. You passed the test. That's we're going to make sure it wasn't you and Snoop Dogg. Now, the one of you and Snoop Dogg's with your son, so that's good
right.
too.
Yeah,
so,
that's right. I do have a family in that one. That's true.
Well, you guys are business partners now because he's sponsoring the Arizona Bowl, so they got a bowl in your stadium.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to understand, right? For a 50-year-old dude that was, his music was, a huge part of my life. It's pretty cool to have that bowl game coming in here and to have him sponsor it. So I'm fired up for that. I think that'll be a great thing for Arizona.
Well, that's what you were playing for UCLA as he is breaking huge, and he's the biggest star in LA at that point. So that's and you recruited his son, right? When you were at Oregon State.
I did.
What's the sales pitch like to Snoop Dogg, the dad?
He was awesome. When he and I were talking about Cordell, it was all football. It was great. It was a struggle for me because I couldn't be a fan. I just had to be a football coach, and I'm talking to a dad, and that's what it was. And we had great conversations, and he's for someone who is as larger than life as Snoop is, he has this amazing, friendly, kind of like joyful demeanor, smiles, laughs. Like, he's just a great guy to be around.
What's the toughest question he asked you as a potential coach for his son?
He asked me if I'd cuss out his kid.
Really?
Yeah.
The man has sworn a lot in public.
It was great. He, like I said, he was a dad. Like, he was a dad that wanted to know his son was going to be coached, and that his son was going to be pushed. It was an awesome. It was a good experience getting to know him.
And it's funny. I'm asking you because it's Snoop Dogg, but I've not thought about it that way. That probably is it the most intense part of recruiting? Some of the questions you get from mom and dad.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially now as we've kind of entered into this new world of transfer portal and NIL and all those things. But I also think at the end of the day, parents want to know that I'm going to care about their son, right? That he's going to graduate from school, that we're going to help him develop off the field as much as we are on. And so those aren't too hard. I've been doing it a long time now, right? So I've gotten some fun ones over the years, some funny questions, where you want to be respectful. So you're trying not to laugh really, but it's
no names. What's the question you got that you're just like, I don't even know if I could answer this.
Yeah, I had someone ask me if they could run on the field with the team. A parent. I was like,
if it's Snoop, yeah, sure. Lil Wayne did it with Colorado last year.
There you have it. Yeah, it was not Snoop. It was not him.
I don't think he would do that. I think that kind of probably depends on the level of player we're talking about. Yeah. You might be able to run that up the flagpole if you're an assistant.
That's right. I did not on that one. I was like, no, we're not doing that. Yeah.
That's awesome, Coach. Thank you so much, and good luck in Las Vegas with all the questions you're going to get at Big 12 Media Day.
I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great.
That is Brent Brennan from Arizona. You will see him tomorrow at Big 12 Media Days, but we had him here first. Now, we turn to a legend in the business, the great Steve Wiltfong, Vice President of Recruiting and Transfer Portal here at On3. Mr. Wiltfong, how are we doing?
Good morning, Andrew. What's happening, brother?
Oh, not a whole bunch. It's quiet here, but it is busy in Ann Arbor. The last time I had you on, I asked you about Michigan's recruiting, and you said, listen, the reason it didn't just pick up immediately when Sharon Moore took over is a lot of people wanted to kind of see Michigan on their own timetables. Well, it seems like a lot of those decisions coming home to roost. Yesterday, they got two pieces of good news.
Yeah, they landed Ivan Taylor, flipping the On3 industry top 100 defensive back from Notre Dame. And they also landed one of the more exciting tight end prospects in the country, Andrew Olesh, beating Alabama and Penn State for him. Michigan's got the number 11 recruiting class in the country right now, Andy. And again, as you said at the beginning, sometimes recruiting's timing. And the guys that Michigan was recruiting, this is a timetable for their decision. And the Wolverines are now landing some of their top targets. And they got a few more big ones out there. Guys like five-star offensive tackle Andrew Babalola, who I think they're in the top 2 or 3 for as they battle Stanford, Missouri, Oklahoma's in there. And Andrew Marsh is a On3 industry top 100 receiver from the Lone Star State that took an official visit in June. I think Michigan is trending for him as well. They also are the program to beat for one of the fastest receivers in the country out of Louisiana, a young man that they've had on campus a couple times. And Philip Wright III, Ron Bellamy, Michigan's receivers coach, is from Louisiana. He's got sub 10.5 speed in the 100-meter dash. Makes me think of a guy like Roman Wilson, who was so dynamic for Michigan in their run to the national championship. He's got that kind of speed, that kind of juice. Would be a big pickup for Michigan. A guy that's kind of under the radar, not highly recruited nationally like some of these other receivers, but a major skill set, a lot of traits. And Michigan's got that track record of getting the best out of their players.
Well, and so under the Sharon Moore administration, has evaluation changed? Has targeting changed? Are they looking at a different type of player since Jim Harbaugh left, or is it still pretty much the method that Jim Harbaugh and company were using when he was in charge?
Yeah, I think when you look at this Michigan recruiting class, you see a lot of size, length, upside. I mean, you take quarterback Carter Smith, 6'3", 190 pounds, out of Fort Myers, Florida. He is the Gatorade Player of the Year in the Sunshine State, a guy who, when he was coming up, was one of the best shortstops in the country in his age division, has now shifted his focus to football. His dad was a pro baseball player, good athletic pedigree, one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the country. He's a guy that I could see being a real problem for defenses down the road at Michigan. But Nate Marshall, Jalen Williams are a couple defensive linemen in the fold for the Wolverines that are 6'5" with a lot of length, a lot of size potential to continue playing that dominant style of football they like to play up front on the defensive line.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how this evolves. You know, as you get further away from Jim Harbaugh being there, but with Sharon Moore, I just kind of trust the development up front. That doesn't seem like that's going to change.
Well, huge shoes to fill for this entire coaching staff. You're talking about Michigan losing their head coach, Jim Harbaugh. They lose their offensive coordinator. They lose their defensive coordinator. They lose their strength and conditioning coach from the last regime. But a lot of the hires are from within.
Yeah,
and they don't lose their offensive coordinator. Sharon Moore gets promoted, and then they promote from within with Coach Kirk Campbell. But again, a lot of changing of the guard, but a lot of guys that were around that were integral parts of Michigan winning 3 straight Big Ten championships and obviously winning the national championship this past year. But these are the guys that are now the shot callers in their respective rooms. So it'll be exciting to see what they're able to do as Michigan turns the page into the 2024 era. Yeah. 2025.
Yeah. 2024 season. 2024 you're in 2025 mode. I understand.
That always screws me up because I'm always working a year in advance based on the recruiting class year. Right. So.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like we're now very deep into the recruitment of the class of 2025. We came out with our updated rankings this week. What's that like? What is a ranking update week like for you? Are you just bombarded by people saying, how could you drop so-and-so? And how could you have this guy ahead of this guy?
Well, there is a loud minority that thinks that there's a conspiracy for their team or their program But Charles Power, Cody Belair, I'm a small part of it, doing the best we can to get these guys in the best spots to kind of predict where they're going to go in the NFL draft. And just because, hey, there's guys that we love as high school players. There's guys that we think will be difference makers in college. But then when you start taking their body types and comparing them to NFL draft history and players on that next level, they don't check that box. So maybe they're ranked a little lower. And then people are like, well, I don't care what their NFL ranking is going to be. I care what their college ranking is going to be because that's what I'm following. Well, it goes hand in hand. Teams with the best pro prospects, the teams with the most NFL draft picks, they generally are the ones that are the best teams on Saturday. So that's kind of the way we do things, but there's no conspiracies. And then obviously Chad Simmons and I, we put out these rankings updates. So with that, we're trying to kind of rehash and remind our readers the latest intel on these prospects processes. So we had the 5-star scoop yesterday. Today we'll have some intel on where things stand with the remaining top 100 guys that are uncommitted or perhaps will decommit down the road or pondering a potential flip. We'll have all that on the site later today.
I am glad you mentioned that because it does seem like decision days are coming up for several people. DJ Pickett, the safe or DB from Zephyr Hills, Florida, he plays corner at like 6'4". But he's making a decision next week. What do you think happens there?
Well, some teams have talked about him playing on both sides of the ball. He is a dynamic wide receiver on the prep level with a skill set to be a blue chip wideout as well. Oregon's one of those programs that's had that dialogue with him. Certainly, again, corner is where he's coveted. But the Ducks are trending right now, in my opinion. They got to hold off Miami and LSU here over the next week or so. But I like the way this is setting up for Oregon. Oregon's got the number 3 recruiting class in the country. That's where they finished a cycle ago. So Dan Lanning and that staff showing that they have the chops to recruit at a high level. There's a lot of resources and backing behind the Ducks program as well right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've seen them make a jump where it feels like this class they're putting together looks like what we've seen out of Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State over the past few years. And those are the ones that compete for national titles. Where was that? Because it feels like Mario Cristobal was recruiting well when he was the coach at Oregon, but it feels like it's gone up another notch under Dan Lanning. Is that strictly because of NIL, or is it because this staff is able to kind of convince these guys to come? Because they live a lot farther away from the best players than a lot of these other schools do.
No, Mario Cristobal and his staff did a good job in Eugene, and that turned into the Miami job for him, his dream job to go back to his alma mater and try and restore glory to Miami. Dan Lanning and company get to Oregon and take over a program that was winning double-digit football games. And they did a good job in the transfer portal right away, landing difference makers on the defensive line. Nobody's done a better job of getting quarterbacks out of the transfer portal than this Oregon staff, from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel to Dante Moore. And then certainly they've got guys like Evan Stewart, former 5-star receiver who was at Texas, who's now at Oregon. They're trying to make the same jump this year that Washington made under Kalen DeBoer, right? Oregon's a team that they've been in that college football playoff conversation and just couldn't beat the Huskies, but they keep at it. They're recruiting at a high level, hit the portal again hard this past cycle, and they'll take another swing this year. And they're certainly one of the programs that you say is on the short list to compete for a national championship. And with the way they're recruiting, you figure they're going to be in this mix for a long time under Coach Lanning and the staff.
We're watching Decorian Moore's fireworks going off on July 4th. One other question about an uncommitted 5-star plus. Excuse me, David Sanders Jr., one of the best offensive linemen in the country. He's deciding August 17th. And where do you see this one trending?
Yeah, and 5-star plus, for those of you that don't know, means it's a 5-star ranking on all 4 industries. David Sanders has that. Number 1 offensive tackle per the On3 industry. Number 2 player overall. I give the inch to Ohio State right now, but this recruitment still has over a month. And I wouldn't be surprised if he took a couple more visits in July to get back to see some of his finals, get back around him again as he and his family work through this decision. David Sanders, not only a premier football prospect, the reigning Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of North Carolina after helping Providence Day win another state championship, but he's also a plus student. He's got aspirations to be an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine major. That's very important to him too. And I think on his last visit to Ohio State, his official the weekend of June 21st, he got to spend a lot of time in the hospital over there, rubbing elbows with doctors, talking about what that Ohio State network means in that city. Being from Charlotte, going to Columbus, I think that's something that would be seamless for him and his family. Likes Ohio State's track record of player development, guys like Paris Johnson. He really fits in with the guys on the team, fits in with the recruits in the class, a lot of like-minded things there. Wealth of potential, as Mom said about Ohio State for her son, David, there. So I know that they really like Ohio State. Tennessee's the other program that we've been watching closely. He's been there 4 times this calendar year, including their 865 live event, their spring game, his official visit in the summer. He's done a day in the life of a student athlete at Tennessee. He's got a great feel for them, likes the way they developed Darnell Wright into a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So those are the 2 programs that I think are in the best position, but Georgia and Nebraska round out the Final Four. And there have been times earlier in the process where I thought Georgia has led. You can't sleep on them for the stage they play on, the player development. And then Nebraska is kind of the program that's been quietly rising. They originally didn't make his top 6. Then he takes an official visit there over Mother's Day weekend. And now they're still in the running where teams like Clemson and South Carolina and Alabama are no longer in the picture. And one of the things that turned him on to Nebraska was he said that seeing Dylan Raiola flip from Georgia to Nebraska at the end of last cycle. He's been building a relationship with Dylan Raiola. They had a really good official visit there. And Nebraska's got a lot of backing and resources to their football program right now as they try and restore some glory in Lincoln under Matt Rule and company. Andy, I think we've talked about this before. Nebraska is one of the more fascinating teams for me this year because if you look at them the last 4 or 5 years, they've lost every single close game. All of them. Every one-score game has gone the other way. So
yeah, if you turn that around,
unbelievable. It's unbelievable. The Minnesota game last year was just another reminder of what that's been like for them. And so Matt Rule and company trying to turn a culture around to win some close ball games. And you do that and it changes the whole mentality around the building in the program.
Before we let you go, there's a really interesting question in the chat from Rick. And I realize this is kind of general, but I'm curious about how you feel like this has evolved over the years. So this is what Rick asked. What is the flip potential today for any commit versus 5 or even 10 years ago? Likelihood of a flip percentage-wise. I realize it's individual based, but is it more likely now? Is it less likely now? Has it changed over the past 5-10 years?
I don't have the data, but I just feel like I've been covering recruiting for 16 years or so, and flips have been relevant the whole time. Now I do remember early on, it used to drive people crazy, and a lot of people that never walked in the shoes of these prospects and their families just thought, again, it was a loud minority, just thought it was just ridiculous that a young man would change his mind.
Yeah.
But look, man, these college coaches, they don't get these jobs by accident. They are alpha, very persuasive.
Mm-hmm.
If you continue to talk to these coaches, they'll give you reason to believe that they're the best players for you to play for. Seasons get played, information changes, other guys commit, guys get hurt, players emerge on depth charts. There's all kinds of factors, coaches moving around. There's all kinds of factors that change recruitments. And that's just the landscape that we're in. But I think it's always happened. And Andy, if you kind of go back and read old stories, like Ronnie Brown was at the On3 Elite Series, and he went to Auburn. I didn't realize he was committed elsewhere before Auburn. Yeah, it was a different era.
We didn't cover it as hard back then either. I think that was part of it too.
Sure.
But and the other thing,
the point remains the same.
Yeah,
it's happened. It's always happened. It's just now the interest in recruiting has gone up each year. There's a lot more eyeballs. These prospects, they used to only be known by the absolute diehards. Now, strong college football fans know who Jeremiah Smith is or DeCorian Moore. where 10 years ago they didn't. So, the media, there's a lot more media coverage on it, which just puts a lot more eyeballs on them. There was a time where these guys were only known by their local papers and Tom Lemming and Alan Wallace. So this industry has really grown, and it's fascinating to sometimes even hear like how the media is perceived in football recruiting media, because again, these prospects, they're blown up because of the recruiting media and the amount of interest and the amount of people. And I'm not talking about just the big ones, On3, 24/7, Rivals, and ESPN, but just so many fan sites and things that are putting these kids out there in such a positive light. They've become, more nationally known, and the interest in it is phenomenal as college football continues to grow and grow.
Yeah, it is very interesting. And the other flip part of it that people don't realize is a lot of times back in one signing day era, when it was just February, there were guys getting clipped from classes by the coaching staff late. But you can't say that. Nobody would ever say that. It would be, and then they flipped. No, they didn't flip. They just needed to go find somewhere else to play. So I think there's just more information. Like, we know what's going on, and we're passing that along to everybody now. And I think there's a better view of the whole picture now.
There was an old coach at Iowa, Eric Johnson, who now I think he runs a bunch of Culvers, got out of the game.
That's right. Yes.
But he told me, he's like, before the internet era hit with Rivals that Shannon Terry started, he's like, I could tell a player on the East Coast, he was our number one defensive lineman, a player in the Midwest, he was our number one defensive lineman, and a player on the West, he was our number one defensive lineman. But now they all can't read it. So they kind of have to change their lingo a little bit,
It is amazing. And now he's selling milkshakes.
Probably, yeah.
Demand never goes down for those. Tony Levine with the Chick-fil-A's in Houston. Then you got your Culvers. What fast food restaurant are you starting when you get out of the business?
Oh man, I mean, so Ray Mickens, I covered his son who went to Clemson. He played in the NFL for a long time. Has taught me a lot about defensive back evaluation. He's a super smart guy that's coached at all the Nike camps and stuff. He's got a bunch of Chick-fil-A's going on, and I've just always been jealous. He's like, those airport Chick-fil-A's kill. And once you get in, you start to learn how to move and shake there, Chick-fil-A's, I'd never not see a line around the building at Chick-fil-A.
That's the one. That's what. Steve Wiltfong, it has been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. That's the great Steve Wiltfong. Let's address some of the stuff, because Rocky Top Tom's super mad because George McIntyre, the quarterback committed to Tennessee, dropped in the rankings. I guarantee you, if David Sanders signs at Tennessee, he'll immediately be downplayed. Immediately. I guarantee you he won't. I'm willing to make that bet. You want to bet $5 on that now, Rocky Top Tom? I think the industry is pretty much decided on how they feel about David Sanders Jr. He's pretty damn good. So, no, if he commits to Tennessee on August 17th, his rating won't immediately drop. Promise. Ryan in the chat is mad about Steve explaining that the rankings are based on projections for the NFL draft. Does he have a crystal ball? It doesn't make any sense. Guys, we're covering recruits. You have to try to predict. When we cover guys leaving college for the draft, we try to predict what they will be. That's the whole point of this. And yes, it is based on where you think somebody's going to go in the NFL draft, because as Steve said, and this makes the most sense, if you have the most NFL players on your team, specifically the most highly drafted NFL players on your team, you have a very good chance of winning the national title. Much better chance than anybody else. Case in point, Michigan last year. Case in point, Georgia the 2 years before. Case in point, all of those Alabama national champions. There's a direct correlation. It's not rocket surgery, people. Of course, that's the easiest way to do it. Now, what it does in the rankings, and I understand this, where this might make college football fans mad, is it does sort of devalue certain positions, because the NFL draft devalues certain positions. Running backs have been devalued in the NFL draft. So to be a 5-star running back is much harder now than it was 20 years ago. Ryan Willings has never heard the phrase rocket surgery. Somebody please explain. All right. So it does change the evaluation a little bit because there are certain positions that are not valued as much. The interior offensive lineman, it's harder to be a 5-star center, harder to be a 5-star guard. But I do think it's generally a great way to evaluate. And because having the best players, the most potential NFL players, the most potentially highly drafted NFL players correlates directly with winning in college football. So that's the reason we do it the way we do it. And I realize it makes some people mad. I realize you don't like it when the rankings change, but it is based on in-person evaluation. Like there's going to be another rankings update after people's senior season. And it'll happen, as they're signing with their schools. And you'll say, well, you did this because they signed with this school. No, it's because we watched everybody again and reevaluated. And it's a constant evaluation. And no, it's not perfect. Sometimes 5 stars don't pan out. Sometimes 3 stars become first-round NFL draft picks. That happens. When people go from age 17 to age 22, things change. But so far, it's a pretty good system. And yes, it gives us something to talk about, something to argue about. Some days you like it. Some days you hate it. That's okay. We're going to keep doing it. Guys, it has been a pleasure. Talking season begins today. Big 12 Media Days getting underway early in the afternoon on the East Coast, late in the morning on the West Coast. Brett Yormark takes the stage at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Cannot wait to hear some actual football content. We got half the coaches in the Big 12 going today. We got players from those Big 12 teams. Cannot wait. We'll talk to you tomorrow.